welcome to another episode of Building Educator Capacity, where we strive to improve student learning by expanding the capacity of our school districts. I am Mitchell Lilly. I am joined by Philip Anderson.
Always great to be here.
In today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Valerie Schmitz and Katie Curran from Proof Positive.
Katie Curran, the founder of Proof Positive, is dedicated to enhancing human flourishing through the science and skills of positive psychology. Under Katie's leadership, Proof Positive designs and delivers on customized learning strategies that fuse the cutting-edge science of positive psychology with the trusted tools of human behavior to produce lasting and meaningful results. Katie holds a Master's of Applied Positive Psychology, also known as MAP, from the University of Pennsylvania and a Bachelor's of Psychology from Tucson University. Dr. Valerie Schmitz joins us once again as the facilitator for this conversation. As a director of the Continuous Improvement and Implementation Center of Excellence at CISA2, she leads work in educator development and district implementation of the Wisconsin Educator Effectiveness System, as well as working with data analysis and school improvement. Valerie has earned a PhD in education with a specialized in instructional design for online learning, as well as an EDD in educational leadership.
Another important conversation here, Phil, as we discuss positivity and the impact on student mental health. As we learned in this conversation, this generation of students right now is having a large amount of mental health issues, where 1 in 4 will likely be diagnosed.
Yeah, I think I'll really enjoy this discussion because not only will it include actionable steps to trigger gratitude and engagement in the classroom, but it also gets helps in our daily lives as well. So I think this will be applicable to everyone who listens, no matter if you're in teaching or elsewhere.
I agree. Special thanks to Miss Liz Elliott, band teacher at Whitewater Middle School in Whitewater, Wisconsin, for the music on this podcast. Here's Dr. Valerie and Katie Curran.
So this is Valerie from CISA2, and I've had the great honor of working in or with schools for my entire professional career. And although always part of my thinking, like many of my peers, I found myself reflecting greatly on the functions and purpose of school, even more deeply since March of 2020. As a practitioner and a parent, I've seen very happy teachers, administrators, and students, as well as many situations where that was not the case. After the onset of COVID and the school building closures, I think it's fair to say that we've all struggled with a new normal, but perhaps we've witnessed a greater awareness of success in some who are much happier than others. And I would wager that this was always the case, but perpetuated by the challenges of late. I will also go so far as to suggest that we've realized that to our students and teachers, even in a virtual world, the relationships, bonding, and socialization that occurs in schools might be just as essential to learning as reading and math. A few weeks ago, I attended a virtual presentation by Dr. Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania. I've always been a fan of his work, but it seemed to have a much deeper influence that time. What was most thrilling, however, was to meet someone who studied with Dr. Seligman and who works directly with schools to help them build positive learning environments. Her passion and relevant work is incredibly powerful. And if ever there was a time that this is needed, oh my, is it now? And I'm very excited to introduce Katie Grann. Katie is Proof Positive's founder. She's a social innovator and entrepreneur, passionate about being a catalyst for human flourishing. She holds a Master's of Applied Positive Psychology, which I learned is MAP, M-A-P-P, from the University of Pennsylvania, and is a positive psychology consultant. She created Proof Positive as a way to grow a team of positive change agents to work with individuals, schools, and organizations in order to help them thrive and flourish. She is an international speaker and field innovator on topics of positive psychology, specifically positive education, resilience, and happiness. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. So, Katie, I'm going to summon the spirit of my somewhat curmudgeonly grandpa. So imagine an 80-year-old farmer in coveralls on his John Deere tractor. Okay, you have that image?
The image.
You have him. All right. So he says, I send you to school to learn, to read, not to be happy. So why is happiness important in schools?
Yeah, great question. So in hundreds of schools and with just tons of educators that I've trained all over the globe, in every audience, there seems to be one of your grandpa, at least. So you don't even have to go to 80-year-olds to find people that are really curious about why in the world we would take time away from reading and math and traditional measures of academic success in order to teach happiness. And I think there are a couple of reasons. One, we know that happy learners actually perform better. So there's lots of research to suggest that when we teach the happiness and we help kids thrive and flourish, if what you care about solely is their academic performance, that will go up. So we're looking at measures of GPA, SAT scores, ATC scores on traditional measures of academic performance. Kids who are thriving and their well-being is higher do better. So to someone who only cares about academic performance, there you go. I think I'm hard pressed to find individuals that only care about academic performance. When we drill down with educators, parents, and students themselves, they all care about measures like happiness and passion and purpose and fulfillment in life. And so then the question becomes, what is the sort of balance of time to teaching skills that help kids be happier while also making sure that they're meeting the mark on their academic measures. And that's really quite easily done because once teachers understand that well-being and resilience and happiness are teachable, trainable skills, then they can start embedding it into their classrooms in really cool, creative ways. So that's a long-winded way of saying, like, I love partnering with teachers because I think they're the most creative individuals in the world. And when you give them the science of positive psychology, they know how to reach kids, and they pretty innately know that happy kids do better. So
Mm, mm. So we're finding that happy kids do better academically, and that sort of thing. What about happy adults? I think in the webinar that I attended, there was some really amazing data just around happiness and measures of success, as we traditionally might measure success, career, family, that sort of thing. Can you just talk a little bit about the correlations there?
yeah, I mean, I think that when we look at adults, right, globally, engagement in the workplace data is pretty pathetic at best.
Mhm.
Um, only 3 in 10 US adults report being engaged in the work they're doing,
Mm,
happy at the job they're doing.
mm,
I think that when you're unhappy as an adult, it correlates to all sorts of things, right? Increased risk for mental health disorders, increased health, physical health issues. And when we're able to help people thrive, we can actually protect against mental health, physical health. We're going to have stronger relationships the happier we are, right? If we're happier for ourselves, we can be happier with others and connect better. So I think there is lots of room for just sort of talking about how people who are well and know how to take care of themselves and have access to the science and skills of what it means to really thrive and flourish do better across all measures.
mhm. I love this notion that happiness can be sort of taught or built. One might think they're just, they're a happy person. They're just born that way. They're happy. They're always smiling. But there's significant research to suggest that happiness can be taught, or the conditions can be built, I guess, in schools to help our students be happier. And one of the models that I love, the framework from Dr. Seligman, and it's on your website as well, is the PERMA model. And I wonder if we could just talk a little bit and how those elements might show up. So PERMA, PERMA, and the P stands for positive emotion. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like in schools and how you support teachers in growing our students?
Yeah, absolutely. So PERMA, more generally speaking, is sort of the culmination of Seligman's work over the last 30 years to say that research tells us there's 5 elements critical to human thriving. Positive emotions is the first that you're hitting. And then there's engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. We'll touch on all 5. Positive emotions, I think, is a really interesting place to start because it tends to be where a lot of people believe positive psychology starts and stops, that we're all about happyology. And as long as you're feeling good, you are good. And that's just not the truth. It's one of 5 elements critical to your well being. But it's an important place to start. So, some of the things that I help teachers understand is the work of a researcher named Barbara Fredrickson. She actually posed the question probably about 20 years ago now, what good are positive emotions? Why do we need them? Why do we feel them? So if you look at traditional psychology, we have long studied things like why do humans feel fear, fight or flight, right? Survival. Negative emotions tend to help us in really tough situations stay alive. But no one had ever looked into like why do humans feel joy? Sit with that for a second, right? Why do you feel love, contentment, serenity? And so Barb helps us sort of understand that positive emotions actually serve to broaden and build our resources. So 20 years of research have shown that positive emotions actually have direct effects on sort of broadening our mind's ability to take in information. So
Hmm.
if when you're afraid, your mind sort of goes into tunnel vision mode and you can only focus on, what that is that you are afraid of, that
Hmm.
lion just outside your cave door, right? If we go back far enough.
Hmm.
When we induce positive emotions, joy, love, serenity, gratitude, the mind actually broadens, it opens up. We're able to think more creatively, we're able to problem solve more speedily, we're able to connect with others. Positive emotions are contagious. So there are mental benefits to positive emotions, right? So I train teachers to understand that um, unfortunately, adolescents today are, as many people listening know, the most depressed, anxious cohort of youth we've ever seen come through our school systems. So
Yeah.
1 in 4 high school students has been diagnosed with a mental health disorder. I
Wow.
call them the lucky few because they had an adult in their life that noticed something was wrong, got around the mental health stigma, took them to counseling, got a diagnosis, and are trying to help them. So
So
we
if I can go back to that, because that's a really powerful statistic. So 1 in 4 have been diagnosed, and our own experiences might suggest that the other 3 might not have that positive adult in their life. So, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, when you look at studies that actually just ask teenagers questions around how often or have they thought about harming themselves or
Mhm,
committing suicide, we're
mhm,
taking a bit of a dark turn here, but the
mhm,
reality is that suicide rates are going up in our adolescents at
mhm.
um, in exponential ways as well. So when
Uh-huh.
you ask anonymously, over 87% of teenagers say that they've thought
Mm,
about killing themselves in the last year. So
wow.
that's why I really think the 22% that have a diagnosis
Mhm.
got lucky and have a parent or an adult who
Yeah,
stepped in for them. So I think we
awesome.
know that we have to do something. We have to act. There's a tidal wave of mental health issues coming.
Mhm,
Um, and so when kids walk into the classroom, teachers don't have time to go around to 24, 26, 28 kids and check each student's mental health. But
mm,
they do have time to be a jolt of joy for all 24 or 28 kids. So I teach teachers that their very first job in every interaction with every student they come into contact with is to have ways to induce positive emotion, to be that jolt of joy, because however they're coming through the door, depressed, anxious, stressed out, hungry, if
mhm,
you can trigger positive emotion for them, you are going to open up their minds, slow down their heart rate, relax them just a bit so that they can access the content that you're actually trying to teach in a much more positive way. So, one of the first things I teach teachers is you have to have in your back pocket at all time jolts of joy for kids. And that comes in different ways. So, um, and this is where teachers can get creative. YouTube clips work wonders. Some teachers who are more in touch with mindfulness or meditation will do a quick 1 minute meditation practice at the beginning of a class.
mhm,
You can hand out index cards, and for your do now, have kids write down 2 good things that happened over the last week, right? We're triggering
mhm,
gratitude. You can just put on some nature sounds and let kids sit quietly. We're triggering serenity.
mhm,
You can have kids write down one person that has done something nice for them in the last week and just reflect on how it felt to connect, right? We're triggering love.
mhm.
So we
Hmm.
don't often think of triggering positive emotions, but I think teachers have to have quick strategies to get lots of kids feeling good as quickly as they can. And that's not to suggest that if you have a student in your classroom who's really struggling, an
Mhm.
index card with 2 good things is gonna pull
Right.
them out of a mental health disorder, but it might just enable them to take a deep breath and get through the next 48 minutes or 51, however long your period is with them. So
Interesting.
that's really, really important. And when you understand the science of positive emotion, you understand that the best thing we can do for ourselves and each other is have lots of ways to access
Mhm.
positive emotions.
That's very powerful. And you talk about the positive emotion not only as a sort of feel good activity to introduce the lesson, but also you had mentioned the importance of that jolt of joy to open the sort of cognitive juices to apply the content and actually be thinking about the work that they're doing. So interesting.
Yeah, for sure. For people that are interested, Barb has 2 books. One is Positivity. It's a really quick, easy read, and it will teach you lots of the science and some quick skills. And the other is Love 2.0, where she does a brilliant job of sort of redefining that love doesn't have to be this unconditional, long term, only in committed relationships.
Mhm.
She defines love as the micro moment in which you choose to put another human before yourself,
Wonderful.
and that we can experience these micro moments and love with one another, with strangers, with close friends, classmates, and that when we do that, we're just growing into our best selves in a much more sort of connected way.
That's fantastic. And we'll add links to her work on our
Awesome.
site as well. So thank you for that. So that's the P in PERMA. The next one, I know many teachers, administrators, parents are struggling with the E, the engagement, especially now when we can't necessarily engage in those social events, and concerts are virtual, and graduations are virtual, prom was virtual, and so even pre-virtual, this was a challenge. How do we engage our learners? Our CISA has done many workshops around this topic. So can you talk a little bit about engagement and what that means for our learners?
Yeah, so there's a lot we can talk about with engagement. Um, we can talk about the concept of flow and helping kids access flow. We can talk about how to identify the contributing factors to flow. My favorite place to start and focus is with character strengths.
Mm.
So, this is the work of Dr. Chris Peterson, Martin Seligman. They asked, what is right with human beings and how do we sort of identify it? So, at the beginning of this sort of search to create positive psychology, they wanted to create a companion guide to the DSM-4. Well, I guess now it's the DSM-5, right? Which really categorizes everything that can go wrong with a mental health condition. Important, important work, right? We can identify symptoms, we can diagnose, we can treat, we can intervene. Great. There was not a companion guide for what's right with human beings. So they set out to create this. What they came up with was the values in action classification. So they, meaning their understudies and their research guys, went and looked at historical texts as far back as they could find it, across cultures as wide as they could go. They were looking at folklore, religious texts. They really wanted to know, like, what have human beings valued across culture and throughout time.
Mm.
And they landed on 24 character strengths, not exhaustive, not exclusive, but 24 character strengths that their research said humans have valued across culture and across time.
Mm.
And then they created a survey, the VIA, the Values and Action Survey, which you can access at viacharacter.org. And it enables each individual to answer a series of questionnaire items and then receive back what their unique character strengths profile is.
Oh.
So, for a long time in education, we've sort of thought about character ed as a one size fits all.
Mhm.
This week, we're going to do respect. Everyone's going to learn about respect. We're going to respect. Okay, and we're done with that. We're moving on to teamwork. This week, we'll all do teamwork. Next week, we'll do courage. And we teach character strengths that way. What
Mhm.
the research actually tells us is one size fits all character isn't where we need to be. We need to be looking at each individual student's unique character profile and accessing which strengths come most naturally to them to engage them,
Mhm.
right? So the research says that we are most engaged and most likely to find flow, and most likely to have an increase to our well-being when we're operating from what's known as our signature strengths. The strengths that are at the top of our profile. So each of us has 5, 6, 7 strengths out of those 24
Mhm.
that flow very naturally from us. So some might be high in humor and a capacity to love and creativity, while someone else is high in social justice and critical thinking and social intelligence, right? So we all have different strengths profiles. When you help kids identify their strengths and then attack their schoolwork from a strengths perspective, right? So you can sort of attack a different task from lots of different perspectives.
Absolutely.
When they learn to maximize their strength, they're going to be more engaged. And this goes for teachers too, right? There's pieces of every teacher's job that they love and that they don't love as much. And you can do some cool job crafting stuff to think about those elements of your job that you don't like as much and see if you can apply a strength to it. So maybe you don't like some paperwork tasks. You have to upload lesson plans. It's not your favorite thing to do. It's a lot of time behind the computer, but zest and enthusiasm is your top strength.
Hmm.
What shifts if you put on some music that's really, high energy while you're doing the task you don't like? Can you get a little bit of your zest going in that task? Can you get creative with, so there's different ways to attack different tasks. And I think if we want to up engagement and we want a good hit to our well-being, the best way to do it is to identify your strengths, become aware of them,
Mhm.
and then become the master of applying them in any given
That's fantastic. And what if we knew that about our students and
moment.
our students knew that about themselves? I'm thinking about the opportunities for collaboration as well. If I'm a teacher who loves to upload my lesson plans,
Right.
my partner doesn't. I mean, what opportunities there? Wow, that's
But,
fascinating.
oh, 100%. And often, what sort of irks us most about the people that we work with and that we live with and are close with
Yeah.
tends to be their character strengths. So if you live with someone who's high in judgment and critical thinking, you're probably like over going on vacation with a spreadsheet, but they can't help but make the spreadsheet for vacation, right?
Right.
So if you just accept that that's their strength and you let them do their spreadsheet, but you're going to, just sort of live more freely and use your zest or creativity to explore the location when you get there and not worry about the spreadsheet, then
Um,
you're good to go. Or maybe you even find some value in getting to maximize seeing places that will excite you because of the spreadsheet. So if we can start to appreciate rather than be irritated by strengths, can I have 1 minute to say one more thing on that?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Working with teachers, particularly those of younger kids, the question comes up all the time. Do character strengths change over time?
Yeah.
So, do I have a different set of signature strengths at 10 years old than at 15 than at 30?
Right.
And the research says, for the most part, our strengths are stable.
Hmm.
So your character strengths are what they are at 5, 10, 15, 20. What shifts is your capacity to use those strengths effectively. So in the right time, in the right way.
Mhm.
With younger kids, they tend to overuse their signature strengths. So the creative kid is the one who's drawn on your walls. The curious kid is the one who never stops asking questions. The zestful kid is the one who's like pacing in the back of the classroom. And what we tend to do as adults who are unaware of strengths because we're blind to this sort of approach to life is we squash the strength.
Yeah.
We tell the zestful kid to sit still. We tell the curious kid to stop asking so many questions. We, scold the creative kid for drawing on the walls
Mhm.
rather than looking for opportunities to shape and mold and help them use that strength more appropriately. So I challenge all educators out there to think about the kids that you're working with right now. Print off the list of 24 strengths from the VIA, go through your grade book, go through your class roster, and just start marking what strengths you've seen in kids so far this year. Can you find a way to appreciate those strengths in them, to shape them, to mold them, to help them grow into the best version of themselves, rather than sort of try to squash the strength, get rid of the strength? It's
Mm.
gonna flow out of them naturally. They can't help it. So we might as well do the best we can to mold it. And hopefully over time, humor starts to look very different in a young kid at 5, humor is getting them in trouble. At 15, we hope that they're using it more appropriately. By 40, we hope their humor is not getting them fired, right? So,
Or yeah, or a Netflix series, right?
yeah, exactly.
I love that. And one of my favorite quotes from the dear late Sir Ken Robinson, he says in one of his very first videos, he says, she's not ADHD, she's a dancer.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
who are our learners? I
We
love,
were all built for something, and we just have to sort of help kids find it.
yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you.
My key takeaway there, teachers might not have time to individually check on every student, but they do have time to be that jolt of joy for every student and triggering positive emotions. There's so many different ways that you can accomplish this. I thought that was a very important message. What did you think, Phil?
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. You don't want to squash the students' strengths. You want to see what they're good at and help build up their skills. Everyone is unique, so we don't want to put down students for what they're good at. We want to reach our best teaching capacity and build up the strengths of our students.
Thanks for joining another episode of Building Educator Capacity. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. For links and resources mentioned in this podcast, please visit www.cisa2.org or click on the podcast description. On the next episode, we'll continue this conversation with Katie Curran, and we'll dive into relational aspects of the teacher-student relationship.
Looking forward to it.